Hello, everybody. Well, we find ourselves in extraordinary times. We're all under quarantine, the Corona quarantine. But the greatest way to change any hard time is to use it for good things. I've got an upcoming book. The name of the book will be Tanya, All the Answers to All the Questions. Over time, people have asked me to share some of the chapters, and that's what we'll be doing now. This will be the first installment. I'll upload these videos, which gives some insight into the content of the book. Somewhere else on this page, you'll be able to see the actual texts of the draft. We'll be doing that incrementally. So right now, we'll be starting the introduction to that book. What I'll be doing is speaking freely, and some of it I'll actually read from the draft and be filling in here and there. Okay, let's start. The name of the introduction is Anyone Authorized to Comment on Tanya? Boom. We'll see in a second why I called the introduction by that name. Here we go. Is anyone indeed authorized to comment on the book of Tanya? That's not meant to be a rhetorical question. Tanya is commonly known as the written Torah of Chabad Chassidus. It's so exacting, the book of Tanya, that though the Alter Rebbe was a legalist, with many works already published, the compilation of Tanya took over 20 years. You'll be able to see the footnotes and the sources for some of these statements, as I say, in the document that I uploaded somewhere else on this page. So precise was the Alter Rebbe, the author, in writing the book of Tanya, that, for example, on one letter, which this is a famous story, he actually meditated for a number of weeks. He organized the number of chapters, 53, to correspond to the amount of weekly Torah readings. In fact, it was customary amongst Chassidim in those days to study one chapter of Tanya a week to correspond with the Torah reading. It's also well known amongst those familiar with these teachings that Tanya is treated, even in relation to other holy texts, with an unrivaled reverence. So how is it, when is it possible, when is it permissible to actually comment on the book of Tanya? I mean, it's the book of Tanya is in a world of its own. Anyone who's ever tasted the book of Tanya, had the honor, the privilege, knows that intuitively. That's the tradition, that's what we say, but the reality is, that is really the reality. The book of Tanya is in its own dimension. It's an own plane. It's in a different atmosphere. So, as we start out with this book, Tanya, all the answers to all the questions, that's the first question we need to ask. Are we, or in what conditions are we permitted to actually comment on the book of Tanya? Or are we? That's the question. For resolution, we'll bring a number of references specifically from the Chabad Rebbeim themselves. The Chabad Rebbeim themselves addressed this specific question. It wasn't understood that you can come out with commentaries on Tanya. It was not. For example, the fourth Rebbe writes, and these translations are my translations, "It should become our established custom to study a chapter of Tanya daily between the afternoon and evening prayers. Immediately after the evening prayer, the speaker should avoid elaborating on each and every word according to his understanding. He should avoid elaborating on the words of Tanya. I warn those listening, in other words, the people listening to the class, not to learn that way. It's well known that every word, even every letter in Tanya, contains many mystical intentions and secrets of Torah. But these were known only to our masters. They knew which chapters could be studied deeply and what we would be able to comprehend. This is beyond people like us to understand. If I were able, again, this is the fourth Rebbe, I would forbid learning Tanya in an intellectual way. Beside the fact that one won't arrive at the real truth behind the text, it's more likely that the results will actually be false or worse. They will be the exact opposite of that which its author intended. If the older Hasidim learnt that way, they surely based themselves on a tradition which they had received. And they are, again, beyond us. They now sit in heaven rejoicing in their learning. Okay, and this is still a quotation. The only area one may go into more deeply is that which directly benefits service of God. Here, okay, the only avenue that you are permitted to expound or comment on Tanya is when it's got some sort of practical, motivational or inspirational or something which is for the purpose of doing. Here, one may expand in his or her study of Tanya. I heard this explicitly from my father, the Rebbe, that words of service which can be learned from Tanya, even though they may not necessarily be the exact intention of the author, nonetheless, one is permitted to expand the speech on these. In each chapter, you should extract the content of its subject, whether this is directly connected to service, contemplation, or personal advice. Okay, end of quote. Okay, so that stands for itself. I mean, we don't need to explain that. You should not comment on Tanya when it's intellectual explanation. What is permissible, because you'll find yourself in somewhere out in left field where it's got nothing to do with the book and you're just floating. However, it is encouraged when you're commenting and explaining Tanya, lemaisa, that it should affect your life. I'm continuing in the introduction to this upcoming book. His son and successor, the Rebbe that I asked, the previous Rebbe, spoke on this same subject. My illustrious father once asked my grandfather what was his reaction to commentaries on Tanya. For example, for the Rebbe Radatz. Okay, fine. My grandfather answered, if this is done as an intellectual activity, it may very well be that we won't recognize the Tanya, nor would it recognize us. But if the intention is to benefit service, even if this isn't exactly what the author intended, just in order to arouse the fellow through Tanya's holy words, then it's permissible to speak at great length, even 70 years. As the saying goes, wordiness is bad, but wordiness in holy things is good. Okay, that's the quote from the previous Rebbe. That theme, okay, that's the end of that quote. Now we'll start a new quote. That theme was repeated by our Rebbe. According to the well-known directive of the Rebbe Rashab, we are allowed to expand on issues connected to service as they are drawn from Tanya, even though we show cautiousness in expressing commentaries on Tanya. Now, that's the end of the quote of our Rebbe, okay? Now, this is, we have another quote here, and I say a few words about this. This is me speaking. This, of course, is the goal of the book of Tanya, of this book, the book which is coming up. Tanya, all the answers to all the questions. Perhaps the best explicit authorization is found in the Tanya's own author's introduction. Okay? In other words, in the Tanya's introduction, The Alter Rebbe, the author of Tanya himself, speaks about commenting and explaining Tanya. And this is my translation of the Alter Rebbe's introduction. Therefore, I wrote all the answers to all the questions to be as a sign for each and every one of us. Again, this is from the introduction of the Tanya itself. And to preclude the necessity to enter into personal audience with me, as time has ceased to suffice for this. In these writings, everyone will find a prescription for his soul and good advice to everything which is hard for him in service. Let him be confident that God will help. He who has difficulty understanding the advice directly from this work, the Book of Tanya, should discuss the issues with those knowledgeable in this area. To those knowledgeable, I ask not to be silent, acting in false modesty, God forbid. It is known the bitter punishment for one who withholds food, and conversely, the great reward for those who don't. As the sages explain on the verse, God will give light to the eyes of both. End of introduction. So I think I think it speaks for itself. We'll just summarize it. Basically, the upcoming book, I don't want to sound like a plug for the book. That's not the point of it. The point is that commenting on and extrapolate on Tanya is not good when it's intellectual. It's like just not the point of it. And we're warned numerous times by numerous rebbeim that that's forbidden. It's just wrong. It's just not the point of it. When are we permitted and actually encouraged to discuss what the Tanya speaks about is when it's related to action, how to live your life, what to do. And the Alter Rebbe himself says that, and he himself says that if you have knowledge, you must teach it, and if you don't have certain knowledge, you must go to those people with that knowledge. And all of the answers to all of the questions are found in Tanya. Okay, that's the end of this, I guess you call it session. I don't know what you'd call this. Till next time, stay strong, stay healthy, stay focused, and stay happy. Take care.